Part 2, Chapter 13. A Place for Us All. Deafening anguish in a whirlwind of razor wire swallowed me whole and spat me out. A spiritual version of myself, duplicated 1,000 times, was ejected from nothing and clattered to the floor. Each cast out only slightly askew from the rest, but all veils of myself collected in a single pile, overlapped and at last complete. I stared lifelessly at the ceiling, eyes agape and deadpan while my unconscious mind gradually settled back. As I grew cognizant, a sharp gasp drove out of my lungs and my eyes slammed shut. The blistering dry lid scraped my eyeballs and forced a vigorous rubbing to ensue. Scratchy and pounding, I allowed my vision to adjust. Sitting up on the lumpy floor, I scrutinized the wall closest to me and followed it with my eyes to the left to see the hallway continue. Down this stretch, I could barely make out that incredibly faint glowing ember. Impossible, I thought. Dizzy as I was, I maintained my doubtful stare until this inconceivable view cemented itself in my mind as truth. The halls had shifted, and I was back. I stood, slanted, and fell into the wall, but caught myself, using it to assist me. Once I was vertical, I gathered my breath and moved toward the orange pinprick. All the while, I dug deep into my brain and pieced together where I had been. Tired of feeling tired, I shot hot air through my nostrils and lifted myself off the wall. A new fire lit itself in my belly, and I was more determined to escape this than ever before. So I carried my body with vigor to the ember, ready to face whatever was next for me. However, this was merely a delusion brought on by a need to survive. Arriving within feet of the door, my powerful strut was brought to an abrupt halt when the glowing ember suddenly erupted into a roaring flame. A loud, crackling rush of air bounced down the halls, and the new light expanded into a wide-reaching dome. The flame was almost mesmerizing. The colors, the dance, it drew me in like a desperate moth. Caution second to curiosity, I tiptoed closer to the door, never once looking away. That is, until I saw something move. Beyond the fire was the once cracked door, now drawn wide open. I stopped as I saw a shadow move within, just beside the reaches of the orange radiance. The stick burned just the same, and I observed, growing more impatient. I could sense it. "Were you in there this whole time?" I commanded a response. A brief pause, then a gurgling slither sprouted from the back. I drew in a low, provoked breath and stepped forward. Another shifting beyond the veil. A whimper. I stopped just before the torch and peered into both rooms. In the original, I took note of its vacancy. No relics to be found and no dangling strings on the ceiling. From here, I could only see a rectangular wavering light extended into the mysterious doorway. I felt it. Pain. Colorful, brutal pain. "Enough," I spoke to the empty. "I'm done with this. Whoever you are, come out." A hushed wind rustled my lashes, coming out from the doorway. A sharp clattering, like pebbles rolling down a concrete slide. The noise rose and sank. My mind still lingering opaque, my nose was wet with anxiety, and the confidence I held in my chest wavered, if only for a moment. Fear. A deep, monstrous bellow churned from within. Its voice was hoarse, fractured with a varied mix of vocal tones, soft and petite like a child, wet and mucus-filled like an elderly woman. There was a certain quality or texture to the voice that made every muscle in my body constrict. From the left side of the casted doorway's shadow, a hand reached into the light and took a gentle hold of the doorframe. Its hand was wrinkled, brown, and had a mix of long and short fingers. The nails were thin and broken, yellowed and at least 3 inches in length. The hand comfortably clasped the door in the upper third of its height, indicating something massive hidden just feet away. Its voice boomed again, not hostile, but wrong somehow. "Mommy, where is Mommy?" It almost sounded like it was crying beneath the words, but laughing in its voice. My fist clenched, my mouth becoming chalky. "What the fuck?" I whispered. The hand slid down the frame, lowering itself to my waist level. My eyes tracked it every inch until it stopped. The knuckles were wrapped in dirty bandages, and the flesh itself was scarred and stretched, mutilated. I kept watch of the hand, but failed to notice the creature's head lurching past the edge at the very top of the doorframe. I only noticed when the glow of its purple eye radiated with its increasing hunger. Keen now to the obvious, I tracked up the edge with an appalling gaze and retreated a step. Halfway exposed to the flickering light was a dreadfully thin, long face with a crooked open mouth that doubled its natural length. Stretching out from the skull were serrated teeth and torn cheek ligaments. Grisly patches of long, twisted hair protruded from the mostly bald skull, swaying lifelessly in front of its wide, menacing irises that rested in the abyssal sockets. A considerable amount of drool slipped from its slack jaw and dripped to the floor. The hand slid back up the door, all the way from the bottom to the top. The door itself was estimated to be 6.5 feet tall, so this thing was undoubtedly massive. Its jaw closed enough to scrape the teeth together before opening wide again. The creature's eyes shut, concealing the purple glow. Then it slid behind the frame again, withdrawing its hand. My heartbeat pounded against my ribcage as the situation was firmly established. It was hidden again in the second room, and I hesitated. I heard a shuddering breath tremble inside. Then it unleashed a blood-curdling scream. This scream physically pushed away the darkness that engulfed it, exposing the creature hunched down, its back rigid and arms clasping the sides of its head. The scream blasted a spiral of hot wind between the frames and directly at me. My arm raised to block the gust, but it relentlessly blew my hair around and forced my eyes shut. Before I could react, I felt its hand reach out and wrap around my shriveled waist. It ripped me from the hall, crashing my torso into the doorframe before being pulled into the dark room with it. The scream dissipated as I was raised up to the monster's face. I dug my fingers under its palm, but was struck by the creature's horrifying stare. Razor-needled teeth lingered at my neck as our eyes met inches apart. The glow of its irises illuminated my face and left me mesmerized.
"Yes, I am lost,"
the creature sobbed. I huffed fearfully. "Get away from me." I grit my teeth, attempting to appear strong, but ultimately revealing myself as powerless. Its stare was almost draining what little energy I had left. It was hard to breathe, to stay awake.
"So much darkness,"
it whispered fearfully.
"Forest,"
it cheered happily. My head bobbed once or twice. I was losing consciousness fast. Then I felt that same old spark that graced me many times before. We both sensed it. The creature lowered me from its vision and looked behind me through the door. I turned my head as well to catch a glimpse of the electric cloud rolling along the floor and stopping at the door. A metallic jostle echoed through the halls, and then it retreated. The creature released me, interested now in the cloud. I landed on my tailbone and fell the rest of the way onto my back. The monster almost seemed stuck in curiosity, momentarily frozen. Its body was visible to me now as I sat up and the light returned to my eyes. It was abnormally tall and lanky, easily over 7 feet. Its entire body resembled what I saw in its hand, loosely wrapped in blood-soaked bandages with charred, oily skin and a horrible disfiguration. The legs were skin and bone and had backward knees like a deer. It was missing a foot entirely, and the other had grown human-like nails. Its torso was wrapped in what appeared to be a shirt, long since decayed and shredded over time. The arms, as previously established, were nearly the length of its full body each, and dragged on the ground by its side like an ape. Its head was held tight by a thin, craned neck, and, strangely, what appeared to be a little red bow drowsily lopping on the top of its head. Then its body began to shake intensely. A loud, wet, snapping drag spit into the air as the monster lurched forward. From the tall arch in its back, dirty white vertebrae shot out, becoming jagged and curved. The fin of bones curved forward, coiling over and past its head. Bodily fluids ran down the newly birthed bone structure, dripping onto the floor. What are you? You're not Tuffle. My entire body was shaking.
Home. I want. Go.
Its words inspired empathy, but not through choice, rather, imposition. More bones shot out from its elbows, knees, and shoulders, randomly erupted from the flesh. The creature was covered head to toe in various bone daggers. It spoke quickly.
Suffering.
Then it screamed.
Suffer.
The monster turned and lunged at me.
Get back!
I hollered, crawling backward. One of its extremely long arms reached down and grabbed my ankle, then pulled me back under its mass. I stared, petrified at its tight-skinned face, and watched as its inward crushed nose began to drip a mixture of red and black liquids. The beast opened its mouth again, and it snapped closed very quickly. Then it opened wider and wider, like it wanted to swallow me in a single gulp. Without warning, the beast's head slammed down on my right shoulder. Its teeth plunged deep into muscle tissue, shredding through the meat and crushing my bones. My eyes widened, and my jaw dropped. A horrible scream bellowed from my chest, shaking the walls and deafening my own ears. I struggled and thrashed to get loose, throwing my fist into the side of its head, but my efforts were wasted. The more I moved, the more it tore into me. Flesh exposed and blood flowing, my arm felt like it was gone already.
Oh, God! Fuck! No!
I struggled and yelped.
Let me go! Please!
I begged. To my surprise, the creature did not laugh at my pain. I was accustomed to malicious figures bolstering laughter in my face. Instead, it cried. Absent of tears, but prominent in saddened whines and heavy breathing. All the while just biting into my arm harder. The longer it went on, the more the beast and I cried out together. Against all expectations, it loosened its powerful jaws and backed away. Blood ran from its mouth and sloshed to the floor. The same blood flooded out from my exposed veins, hanging and protruding sloppily at the edge of my skin and bone. Regrettably, I focused on my arm. I didn't know how to react. My mind was not prepared for a situation like this. I was flushed with agony, mind shooting signals without enacting action. It then placed one long finger on my throat and dragged it down the center of my chest, stopping at my belly button and reversing back to my neck again. Tense. It gave a sad voice again.
I can't stop. Want. Die.
Its finger lifted away and went up to its mouth where it licked the wrinkled flesh. It then turned itself around and started to move toward the back of the room. For a moment, I stupidly thought I would be left alone. But then, I felt its hand wrap around my ankle and begin to drag me further into the room.
Stop,
I softly urged, my arms raised above my head as I was forcibly brought along.
Just stop,
I shouted. As I did this, it released my ankle and quickly hunched over me like a wild animal, grunting and dripping spit. A new voice called from deeper in the room. Calm. The beast raised its head and craned over its shoulder.
Oh man, what now?
I panted, groaning with irritancy and pain.
Good girl. Now come here.
A new feminine voice commanded. The monster lifted itself off me and slowly lumbered to the back of the room, leaving me amidst the darkness with no sense of exactly where I was. Propping my chin on my chest, looking down toward my feet, I saw a shimmering blur, like a heat wave in the summer. Then, that blur split from the middle out into a wide window and a massive amount of light poured in, blinding me temporarily. Once my eyes refocused, I could see trees, an overgrown, saturated forest, and the monster standing just in front of the living image. It moved through the barrier, undulating reality as it crossed the threshold. The other voice spoke, hushed but with a twisted joy in her lips.
Keep searching. You'll find your mother someday.
An exasperated sigh from the beast, then a low cry, and the projected forest blipped away. The all-consuming dark returned, and I watched the hazy shape of someone new. Somebody seemingly human, or more.
Little lamb,
She called out in a hushed voice. She hid in the shadows. Again, I saw 2 more bright purple irises hovering beyond the veil. But these were different than the beast's, a lighter shade. My arm felt heavy and almost non-existent, but this place had strange properties. The pain was horrendous, but at the same time manageable. It was difficult to move, but still I summoned a large portion of my strength and pulled myself to a half-sitting position, my arm limp and dragging me down.
Show yourself,
I demanded. By her command, or mine, 2 more torches mounted on the wall spit into flame, one on my left and the other on my right, both about 15 or so feet away, and each dome meeting my body in the middle. Out of the silence, a soft humming crept its way into the atmosphere, a familiar tune.
Mary had a little lamb.
She whispered very slowly, so raw and gentle, every word dragged itself out.
Little lamb, little lamb, little lamb. Mary had a little lamb whose fleece was white as coal.
She finished abruptly. A trail of prolonged breath followed. I panted uneasily. She took a step forward, just enough to be in the freshly spawned light. This girl stood confident with a fascinated, raised chin smile that sent goosebumps up and down my skin. She had an unnatural sway to her, as if she couldn't keep her balance. Her hair was long and ruby red, wild and thick down to her lower back. She wore human clothes, unsurprisingly enough. A tight-fitting dark gray long-sleeved shirt that was ripped and stretched from the neck seams over to the right shoulder. She had black, loose-fitting sweatpants with the ankles rolled up halfway and no shoes. Her human-like appearance was quickly diminished when I noticed the 2 serrated, black horns protruding from the top of her head, gripping tightly to her skull like a demented bull. I shivered, trying to keep focus, but everything was wavy and distorted. The girl smiled still.
Hello, Mary. Where is your lamb?
She asked kindly.
Who are you?
I asked tiredly, angrily.
I have more than just one name. Everyone I kill that has had a chance to speak gives me a new moniker.
She sighed, pleased.
But you can call me Lyonic,
she said with a sharp hiss. Her voice was somewhat deeper, more mature than she appeared, though her tone fluctuated. She had exceedingly thin features like Alice, and wore that same gray skin, except hers was a darker tone. Her face was rounded at the jawline, but came to a soft point at the chin. Her brows were defined and low, scowling through yellowed teeth and receded gums. Curiously, her face had strange black markings, like tribal tattoos that started at the bridge of her nose and extended in a curve over and under her eyes. Just barely visible by her wrist beneath the sleeve were more black marks that assumingly extended up both arms.
Lyonic? You, Destro, the one at my school? Ever since I took this deal, you creeps are just crawling out of the woodwork.
I snarled, trying to ignore the fluctuating throb in my arm.
That is the point of this little game. You shouldn't be surprised.
She spoke to me in a very condescending way. She took a long pause, crossing her arms before speaking.
I must say, I'm disappointed. From the condition you left Destro in, I figured you'd be more.
What are you talking about? You found him?
She cocked her head.
Of course. He took a blind jump and landed a few towns over. I tracked his energy, and he told me all about you. All except, of course, where to find you. For that, I needed help.
I looked at her with confusion on my face, but it was all slowly falling into place.
The devil in the cloak? That wasn't you, but someone who helped you?
Right,
she said. Then she reached into her pocket and removed a small bronze coin broken in half.
They came to me when I struggled to find you and offered me this little trinket.
And what exactly is it?
I asked, the sharpness of my injury still twitching. Lyomik pointed to me.
You were given one as well, though you won't find it in these pockets. The coin allows me to enter your mind only after you've been awoken as your very soul.
So, it's true. The pieces were there, but it was too difficult to think clearly. It all makes sense. We're inside my mind, I explained.
Oh yes, such a wonderful relic to allow me in my current location to murder you in your own consciousness. But it has its limitations.
She returned the coin to her pocket and started to look at the corner.
I'm bound to this room alone. Thankfully, I was able to summon Minerva here through my own overlapping bubble in the real world, and she drew you in just as I'd hoped.
I glared at her, becoming angrier by the second. I thought about the thing she called Minerva and recalled its saddened cries for its mother. I pulled myself up a little more, the pain flooding back but not burdening me entirely. With great effort, I stood myself in a hunched position and stared her down.
If I'm my soul right now, then where is Alice?
Lyomik tapped her chin with her pointer finger with a false bemused look on her face.
Somewhere, for sure. But she won't be bothering us. She's been locked down.
My brows lowered. Then, as I absorbed her features more and more, another piece to the puzzle was set in place. A subconscious voice slapped the back of my skull. Her face did seem familiar to me, and now I know why.
Lucy.
It clicked. Her face went straight.
How do you know that name?
A satisfied face washed over me.
She warned me about you a long time ago. Told me you were a coward.
What? You think she helped you? How does that information do you any good?
She grinned wider.
Because I know you're not as strong as you want me to think. You only killed Destro because I softened him up for you. You couldn't track my energy because you don't have good enough senses. And you had to invade my mind, cutting me off from Alice and use your pet to weaken me further before killing me yourself. That's pathetic,
I taunted. My words had no effect on her. She just smiled a creepy smile and swayed side to side, occasionally twitching.
Whatever it takes to win,
she sang.
You will die, and your essence will contribute to my throne. Be proud of that.
She paused to twist her shoulder in place.
Besides, Destro had the sharpest sense of us all. He was the only one that could pinpoint your location. But from what he said, even he was disrupted upon getting closer. Curious, I feel nauseous being so close to you.
I scowled, unsure of how to respond. She took a step toward me and casually brushed the hair out of her face and continued that motion to the hair that surrounded each horn. She took a moment to pull some of it down and fix loose strands.
Horns. That's new,
I observed, somewhat stalling. Almost looking happy that I pointed them out, she rubbed one hand up and down the side of her right horn.
Do you like them? Too bad you'll never reach such profound power. When you are left a withered husk in the dark, Alice will feel the drain of her own anima, and will be so easy to claim.
She sighed despondently.
Seems more like a curse to me. Living a life of constant bloodshed and pain? Murdering anyone in your way? All for what? Power? A chair beside Daddy's throne?
You didn't hear me before?
My throne!
I will kill kill Sin too and become all-powerful.
I grinned, holding back a chuckle.
Until then, you're just a scared cockroach, scurrying from shadow to shadow, searching for your next crumb.
She took another step forward.
That's where you're wrong. Most tough fear death, losing out on their only chance in the game. But me? When I stole Lucy's skin, I made the most of it.
The more she spoke, the more excited and demented she became.
On my second walk, I did so bold. I slaughtered an entire shopping center. Women, children, the elderly, and every cop that was foolish enough to respond to the distress call. Their bullets weren't so effective the second time.
She paused and pressed her right ring finger to her lips.
Oh, I'm sorry. I forgot. You wouldn't know what a thrill that is. Just a taste.
She trailed off.
No, I don't, because I'm human. I still have a choice. Sure, I've made mistakes, lashed out and blamed everyone else but myself. I've betrayed not only me, but the ones I love for revenge. But I'm no monster. You are. You tough will wear our skin, make us lose our minds and commit heinous acts against our own until there's nothing left. For that, I will kill sin, end this cycle of suffering, and atone for the wrongs I've done.
My words became stronger, more defined by the end of my speech. She watched me, smiling on and on with patient composure.
Are you done? Because I think we've talked long enough. Kim.
My finger twitched.
Don't you dare call me that. Nobody but those I call family can use that name. I won't allow it.
And what will you do? Kimmy. If you haven't noticed, you're all alone.
She gestured around the room, lifting her hands in a shrug motion, emphasizing that there was no one else. Suddenly, she cocked her head sideways, her expression as wide as a deer in headlights. As defeated as I already was, I stared her down. I don't know why. This blind confidence was stupid. Maybe I am a fool. All I know is that I'm not going to let them jerk me around. I'm not weak. Making sure I stood as straight as I could, I planted my feet, took a step forward, and never broke the line of sight.
I won't give up, even if Alice isn't here with me. I refuse to stand here, in my own mind, and die without a fight.
She raised her head to the ceiling and gave a giggling exhale before returning her determined expression to me.
I don't think the word fight applies to you right now.
Quickly, she closed the gap between us and punched me in the side of the face. I fumbled backward, but somehow kept myself upright. My right arm was nearly limp, but had enough strength by now to raise up and use to block. My other hand reached up and touched the tender flesh of my cheek before reconnecting our stare. I understood something. My soul was not like my physical body. It behaved similarly, but the core strength of what I was couldn't be more different.
You hit like a girl,
I mocked, fire in my voice. Her face widened with happiness.
Ooh, you've got a spark. Where is this sureness coming from?
She hunched down low and extended both arms out to her sides, curling her fingers and preparing herself. I repositioned and brought both arms up in a loose fighting stance.
You said no more talking,
she sneered.
Combat banter isn't talking.
My only option now was to buy time. Alice is here, somewhere in my mind. Maybe she will feel my soul breaking and rescue me before it's too late. Maybe she's on a timer. Maybe if I hold out, she'll eventually be forced to leave.
You know what I find so wonderful?
She asked.
The sound of your own voice?
I responded in annoyance.
Funny. No, that you're only acting tough because you realize your soul can withstand more than your flesh. But it won't matter. It just means you'll suffer longer.
She finished her words with a shout and dash in my direction. Again, her fist collided with my face, but this time, my body was lifted off the ground and sent backward, slamming into the wall by the open doorway. I crashed into the wall, flattening out and sliding down to my feet, where I caught myself but tumbled forward. Before I could fall to the ground, She ran up and caught me by placing one hand on my shoulder and holding me steady. She then pressed me against the same wall with one hand and looked me dead in the eyes, inches away. She aggressively pulled me off the wall and slammed me back into it, over and over. My head followed the momentum of my torso and slammed into the wall repeatedly until the room started to spin. She stopped and let me dangle loosely, held up only by her hand. She leaned in close to my ear.
So brittle, so thin. You already transformed today, didn't you?
Her sing-song voice plucked my nerves. My head draped and my arms dangled. My shoulder blades and skull were screaming in pain, but I would not fall into unconsciousness.
You say something,
she replied. Lifting my head up, I glared at her with blood in my teeth. Fuck you. Disregarding the limitations of my ethereal body, I raised my left fist and threw it at the side of her head with as much strength as I could muster. It connected with a hard thud, but something was immediately wrong. She was smiling still, seemingly unaffected by my attack. Then, I felt the surging sting shoot up my arm. My eyes tracked to my knuckle, where I saw that her hair had turned rigid like needles. At least 100 hyperfine wires pierced straight through my hand and protruded out the other side with a bloody glisten in the torchlight. I gasped sharply in pain, and a thunderous quake engulfed my arm. She then released my shoulder, causing all of my weight to go forward and get knotted in her razor hairs, tearing and pulling violently at my flesh. My foot instinctively went forward to catch me, but she swept my leg out, which caused me to fall to the side. As I fell, my fist was ensnared further in the hair, and I was left hitting the ground with my fist still curled and stuck. I attempted to get back up and pry my hand loose, but she was already releasing me. Her hair returned to normal, and she immediately planted her bare foot onto my chest and knocked me back down. I hit the ground with a limp roll and came to a stop on my back. My hand curled to my chest and spewed blood from the tiny pinholes. "Dirty move," my voice cracked. My fragile body shook as fear overcame my fabricated assurance.
I'd like to hear some confessions.
She opened and closed one hand. Panting, distracted by my hand and shoulder, I glowered with one eye partially open. "What do you mean by that?"
I want you to admit,
She paused before stomping her foot on my wounded shoulder,
that you were a mistake.
Saliva shot from my lips, and my only free hand grabbed the bloody mess as she reeled back.
You're an insignificant mound of self-loathing garbage that deserves to burn along with this world.
Her face was straight, impassioned by some deep hatred that shined bright in her eyes. She stepped back and watched me struggle, rolling onto my stomach and lifting myself up to a kneeling position with one arm. Feeling the spotlight burn bright under my skin, I took many staggering breaths and hoisted myself upright. Swaying, dizzy from it all, I stood at a slant. Both arms dangled by my side, my head crooked and gawking at her with darkness forming in my eyes. She hummed. Without warning, a hot shockwave blasted out from her body and pushed me back onto my heels. Recovering my balance, I leaned forward and braced myself for what was coming next. Her entire right arm started to glow a light, dusty purple. Black particles spiraled out and around her arm as the sleeve was shredded by her raw output of energy. It seems I was right in the fact that the skin of her arm was tattooed just the same as her face. Black angled snake tails ran from her collarbone down to her wrist, then extended to her fingertips as the new energy polluted the air. I watched with tired eyes. The sound of her power bounced around the walls like a shrill cackle, but all I could hear was a muffled metallic jingle. Desperately clanging now, the sharp noise rattled on in the foreground of my ears, stealing my attention away until her voice grounded me.
It's time to expire.
Lyomic dashed forward with an unearthly speed, followed by a harsh gust of wind that flattened the fabric of my shirt and knocked my hair back. She was close to me, frozen in place with a proud look on her face. Then I felt something odd. My waist and upper legs got warm top to bottom. Wet. An intolerable amount of pain abruptly consumed all of my being and forced my eyes to lower and witness the violence. Her fist, still emitting a soft glow, had been punched right into my gut. Hot blood spewed radically from the newly formed hole in my abdomen. At that moment, I vomited the same blood, spitting some onto her unflinching face. The nightmarish mixture fell to the ground, painting her arm and both of our feet. I couldn't scream. I wanted to let out the most horrible, guttural admittance of pain that I could, but it would not come. Just the sound of my soft gurgles slipped through my agape mouth. My legs swayed, vision blurred with a harsh pull. She ripped her fist from my body, sending me crippled to the ground with a wet splat. Now, I lay prone, and the screams finally erupted.
Oh, God! Holy Jesus! What the fucking...
My entire body was on fire, my insides spilling out onto the floor.
And there we are. Let your screams echo in the hallways of your mind. They make me go mad,
She declared, and her body shivered intensely.
Where is your gusto now, little girl? You were trying to act so tough, and look where that got you.
She snickered.
On the ground where you belong.
She then placed her bare foot on my throat. I gagged, and she applied her weight onto my neck. I struggled, blood filling my mouth.
Oh, how sad you are, little Kimmy. So weak, a lowly child begging for death. You don't know anything about strength.
I respired. In response to that, she gave me a hard stomp, forcing all airflow to be blocked. She grinned widely before bending down to my level. I tried to stay awake, fighting as best as I could. Unable to move or defend myself, she reached her hand to my face, placed 2 fingers on my lips, and opened my mouth fully.
Do you remember when my father first came to you? That feeling of dread. You knew it would end this way, but you ignored your instinct. Lucy did too.
She smiled, then gradually slid her 2 fingers deeper into my mouth. She lingered there just a moment.
Humans, vile and abhorrent little things. Purity is a lie. None of you are saved from this cruel fate. It's better this way. The world I will create will have order. You humans will be slaves to the fiends and remaining tofu, and you will be grateful.
Her fingers sloshed around the pool of blood. I was drowning.
And I have you to thank, Kimmy. I will recognize and accept your contribution to make this a reality.
Her fingers became rigid as she jabbed them both down to the back of my throat, deeper. My eyes went wide as they could, and a soft scream bubbled from my lungs. Unable to breathe, I reached up with one arm and tried to pull her hand out, but it was no use. There was nothing I could do. I was completely at her mercy. A playful chuckle entered my ears, and quickly, she jammed her entire fist into my throat, tearing muscles and breaking my jaw like a dry twig. This feeling, I was accustomed to it. The helplessness, the fear, just like my entire life before me. At school, with my dad, being trapped by another with no way to escape. Violently, she ripped her fists out of my mouth and punched me in the forehead on the rebound. Everything went black and swirly. Unable to cry, unable to scream, I lay there in a dreadful daze, dying. My vision was gone now. That punch to my head was more than enough to cripple the rest of my movements and restrict the signals my soul was trying to send. A loud buzzing erupted in my ears, blotting out her words. She mocked me, ridiculed me, but I couldn't hear anymore. Slowly, everything began slipping away. There was a cage. In the blackness of my fleeting existence, I floated down a river of obscure dark liquid. My raft consisted of sinking paper and delicate stitching holding it all together as the thick liquid attempted to soak through. The current was docile, quiet. A wide open space with clouds and a personal sky of dark red and murky brown overshadowed the infinitely expanding verse I waded through. There was no destination and no beginning. I found it there, resting on the shoreline, half buried in the sand. Once noticed, The cage seemed to stand out above the abyss, a three-dimensional object on a two-dimensional plane. My dilapidated craft magnetized to the shore, and I was able to dock. The cage itself consisted of thick, rusted bars with gaps big enough to slot a finger or two, but no more. A small rectangular sheet of metal with a single keyhole in the upper third appeared to be the only means of entry. A grimy russet aura swirled within the bars, confined by some magic barrier incomprehensible to me. I closed the gap and planted my feet in the sand, staring with mindless indulgence. Observing the keyhole closely, I discovered a crack that slowly spewed an airy vapor of similar substance. I followed its floating pathway with my eyes back across the river to a door that rested on the opposite shore. This door was reminiscent of the rift I saw, but wrong in a way. It was open wide, decayed and black within. Turning my attention back to the cage, I allowed my eyes to linger on the crack. Without my command, I reached out and began scratching at the gap. The river of blood grew lonely with my absence. Bit by bit, I clawed at the metal, but was quickly taken whole by vibrating tendrils. The living wisps of murky blood stretched from the river and tied around my ankles, chest, and neck, attempting to drag me back into the perpetual flow. I struggled against it, continuing to scratch away with unparalleled desperation. There was no noise, not a whisper, grunt, or splash of liquid. Then, the mist within took on a shape, saturating with familiar colors and tones. It was her, him, them, my friends and family. It cycled between their appearances with rapid aggression, burning their faces into my retinas until the smoke began to shrink down to the size of a small child. It birthed a new form, the shape of Alice. She seemed afraid. Black tears drained down until she curled up into a fetal position before changing one last time. It was me. I was just a kid, sniveling and afraid, but my skin was white and my eyes blackened by some unholy influence, tainted to the very core. Terror coated my face, and I reared back my fist, then punched the lock. The worn metal shattered to the sand, and the small door unhinged itself, allowing the smoke within to freely escape and pour into my skull.